the nation's heartland. You're listening to Mundo in the Morning on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio.
Well, Roger Marshall, Kansas U.S. Senator, is going after the credit card companies. He's got a push for the Credit Card Competition Act, and it's one of the few things right now in Washington, D.C., that actually has bipartisan support. The president threw his support behind Senator Marshall in a post earlier this week on social media. The senator has been all over cable news talking about this and giving his 2 cents. He will join us momentarily on KCMO. But he was on Fox Business yesterday, and here's what Roger Marshall had to say.
Look, I'm always going to be out here fighting for hardworking Americans. I'm going to be fighting for Main Street over Wall Street. Look, 2 credit card companies work hand in glove. Them and about 5 banks control 80% of this industry. Because of that, Americans are paying 7 times more for swipe fees. These banks are charging 20 to 30% interest. You know, think about this. The average family back home carries $7,000 of credit through from month to month at a 30% interest rate. That's well over $100 a month. That's not fair. This monopoly, this oligomonopoly is why this is happening. Desperate times call for desperate measures. If we can fight for hardworking Americans, I'm right behind President Trump on this one.
All right. Well, that right there was Senator Marshall yesterday on Fox Business Network. And there's a lot of people who are going to like the way it sounds. I have questions. I mean, Doc and I are on the same page probably 90% of the time. But this one I just have questions on. I don't know if it's actually going to have the end result that he wants it and that we all want it to have, right? Which is figuring out how to give people a better bang for their buck if they're carrying credit card debt. But the other part of me says, you know what? The best thing we can do is go out there and make sure that we have an economy and a government that is not devaluing the dollar every single day by printing money we don't have. That's the best way to keep people out of credit card debt, and that's the best way to make sure that the middle class can continue to survive and then thrive. Because the system we're creating is basically a K-shaped economy. If you do not own assets, you are going to be left behind in this economy. And by assets, I don't just mean a home. I mean, it could be stocks. It could be anything, right? But you've got to have things. You've got to have assets that are outperforming inflation. Because inflation, as much as the inflation number came in yesterday at 2.6%, and that was great. It was welcomed. It's still not at the 2% target that, of course, the Fed has been wanting for many years now. So this is obviously something that the Republicans in Congress would be well served to tackle. But nobody wants to touch this. So in the meantime, they keep printing money. They run $1.5 trillion deficits. And they devalue the dollar. They squeeze out the middle class. Those who are asset owners do well. Those who aren't continue to see their dollars become less and less valuable every single day. So that's the bigger picture. Just the head of the snake, I guess, is the credit card deal and these credit card companies and what exactly this is going to look like moving forward. But we hope to have Roger Marshall on here momentarily and get him on the show for a few minutes to talk about this, because I think it's a noble cause in the sense of trying to help people who have a lot of credit card debt. But is this any different potentially from Joe Biden saying, basically, I'm wiping out student loans because I feel like it? That's my question. But at least this is Congress doing something about it and not just a president doing something via executive order. So if we can get Senator Marshall on momentarily, his folks say that he will be here soon. We will make that happen on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Always streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Pete, when banks give 1.5% interest on money, then they borrow from you and charge 30% when you borrow from them. It's a no-win for the consumer. Watch what happens to savings accounts and the rates on the saving accounts if the short-term 10% cap passes. Well, you tell me. I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen. I'm also intrigued by Senator Marshall, who joins us on KCMO. All right, Senator, I know you're just hopping on here. You and I are simpatico on most things. I get the end goal here. I always have concerns when the government wants to dictate the private market. So why is this Credit Card Act so important, and why do you think it can work and not be a classic version of the government putting itself somewhere it doesn't belong and actually making things worse?
Yeah, well, good morning, Pete. And I do appreciate, the thought and the question. Our credit card bill increases competition. It's going to lower the cost of gas and groceries 1% to 2%. I'm a free market capitalist like you are. But when there's monopolies that are present that are putting the shaft to American consumers, then something needs to be done. Very briefly, there's 2 credit card companies, 5 Wall Street banks, controlling about 85% of the credit card business. Because of that, Americans are paying 7 times more in swipe fees than folks in the EU, and the interest that we're getting charged is 20 to 30%. That's predatory loans, right? So I think that the banks and the credit cards bite. One more point: the credit cards have a net profit margin. Visa and MasterCard, 45 and 55%. The bank's net profit margin is 20 to 30%. So they are screwing Americans. And in this day, when I have a significant number of young couples, young families, single moms that can't make ends meet, they have on average $7,000 of credit they're carrying over. They're getting charged 30% interest. They can't make it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I understand all of it. Is it a slippery slope to say the government should be upset with the profit margins of a private company, though?
I think when there's a monopoly, yes. And I wish the Justice Department had went in there and broke them up for whatever reason. That doesn't ever happen. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm always going to err on the side of Main Street. I'm going to err on the side of hardworking Americans. To heck with Wall Street banks. They're not doing anybody any good in Kansas. And I want to emphasize 2 things. Number one is what we do in our credit card bill is force competition. When Dick Durbin brought this to me, he wanted to put a cap on it like Europe and said, no, we won't do that. So all we're doing is forcing banks that in addition to having Visa or MasterCard as one of the networks to use on that technology for the swipe, they have to choose somebody else. It can't be from China. The bank gets to pick it. So I think it's the win-win situation. And by the way, there's not one bank or credit union that calls Kansas home that's from Kansas that'll be impacted. Any bank, credit union with less than $100 billion of access is exempted. So we're hoping to bring this market back to community banks, to community credit unions as well. So I think that was another thing I wanted. It was an exemption basically for community banks who I think are just doing an incredible job as well as the credit union.
So if your act were to pass, how do we, because you're right, I mean, more competition in any marketplace is good for prices. So how does this bill potentially bring more competition into the marketplace?
Right. So just like your debit card, if you pull out your debit card, if you're driving, don't pull them out. But you're going to see that there's several different ways to run those through the system, the network that does the technology. So when the bank issues the credit card, they can put Visa or MasterCard there on it, and then but they have to choose at least one other network. Now, already in Europe, they're doing this. In China, they're doing it. So don't let the banks tell you they can't do it. They're doing it on your debit card. They're doing it overseas as well. And then you, the customer, you're not even going to know. Just like in your debit card, you don't know which one, when you take it to the retailer, you don't know which one of those 4 or 5 networks are going to run that through it. And by the way, crypto's knocking on the door with this as well. And very soon, I think there'll be a crypto option on those credit cards.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Now, you mentioned the credit unions in Kansas. Do you want the credit unions to get into this game to help with competition, or are you saying that they just won't have any downside and there will be no impact on them?
Yeah, so I'm not as familiar with the credit unions. I assume that they're already issuing credit cards. Mm-hmm. And I'm just saying that there's only one credit union in the country that has assets above $100 billion. So they're not going to be impacted by this. If you got your credit card through a local credit union, they should not be impacted by this in any way, shape, or form. Gotcha.
Okay, Senator Marshall is here. Do you have concerns that because one thing I think that has been fairly brought up here is if you cap it at 10%, if you cap credit card interest at 10%, which the president wants to do, I'm not sure if that's in your bill, but if you go down this road, people that may need access to credit no longer have it? Are they going to loan sharks down on the street corner, and suddenly that's actually a worse situation for them? Do you have any issues or concerns on that front?
I don't. I think that's a false argument. As I pointed out earlier, banks with assets less than $100 billion can still charge 15%, 20%, or whatever it is. But, Pete, think about this. I'm a big Dave Ramsey fan.
Yeah, me too.
If you're carrying $7,000 or $10,000 over on your credit card every month, maybe you shouldn't borrow the money. Maybe you should try to live within your means. And I understand there's people listening that like, my gosh, how do I do it? But for decades, for centuries, Americans lived without credit cards at all, and we certainly paid off our credit card every month as well. So, when your interest is getting real high, basically the bank is saying, hey, you're living above your means. Do you really need 3 cell phones? Do you need 5 televisions? Do you need a new car? And I'm not trying to be too critical, but I would go back and do the Dave Ramsey course if I'm carrying again, an average American family is carrying $7,000 of credit card debt over month to month, an interest rate between 20 and 30%. You can't make ends meet.
No, you can't. But, Senator, is it fair to say that maybe a fallacy in the bill itself by tying this all back to personal responsibility and Dave Ramsey principles and living within your means and the government just staying out of it and saying what we've got to really preach is people living within their means, and what the government can do to help the middle class is make sure that the dollar's not getting devalued by the year, which is what we suffered through the last several years?
I mean, you make a great point. It's hard to, the government certainly is not going to teach morals, and I'm not sure if this is a moral lesson anyway on how to live within your means. I guess, Pete, I've become pretty pragmatic. I have my values. We share faith and same conservative Judeo-Christian values, but I've become pragmatic. I woke up here, and all of a sudden, these banks are just out of control. Big banks, Wall Street banks are out of control. The credit unions out of control. We have PPMs, which have a monopoly as well. Health insurance, there's like one hospital system for every market area. There's 1 or 2 insurance companies for the entire state. So we live. What the government should do is roll back regulations. Over-regulation creates consolidation of industry. I think it's one of the reasons that small banks got out of the credit card industry is that, A, the big banks could just do it more efficiently, and B, it was just one more compliance issue for them. So I think the federal government should be focused on rolling back regulations. I wish I didn't have to do this. I wish there was competition. I wish that the credit card companies would have been broken up, but they're not. And I just want to do whatever I can. And President Trump is absolutely committed to bringing down the cost of groceries. And again, our credit card bill is going to drive down the cost of gas and groceries 1 or 2%. I mean, It'll be like close to zero inflation for gas or groceries the rest of the year if we pass our bill.
Yeah. All right. So what's your timeline? I mean, we know things can move slowly in Congress, but it seems like there is bipartisan support when you've got conservatives and Elizabeth Warren on the same page. There might actually be some runway there. So what's your timeline on this in the final minute?
Yeah, Pete, well, we're on Trump time now, right? We're on Trump time. Let's put it this way. Friday afternoon, I'm driving home to my home in Great Bend, outside of Great Bend, and I'm almost to Hutchison. And I get a call from my staff. The president's going to call you in a second. Like, okay, it's Friday night. I don't know if it's 7 o'clock. I'm at Walmart parking lot in Hutchison, Kansas. I got to pick up some groceries. I'm talking to the president of the United States about this at 7, 8 o'clock at night in the Walmart parking lot in Hutchison, Kansas, snowing cats and dogs, by the way. And I'm just trying to tell you that we're on Trump time now. He said this 10% thing was going on. He wanted to cap things at 10%. He said, hey, Marshall's the credit card guy. Get him on the phone, and away we go. And I bet I've talked and texted with the president a half a dozen times and his staff since then. So we got to find a way to do it. What, where, and when, who knows, but we're on Trump time now. He is dead serious about lowering the cost of living for people, and you're going to see him doing it in housing. He's going to have a big announcement tomorrow. Friday he wants me to come to the White House, and he's going to talk about how his plan for health care, for housing, and that's what the Republicans are focused on, driving down the cost of living. Under Joe Biden, we got a 50% increase in housing. We got to break that, figure that one out. Child care is way up, property insurance, health insurance. We inherited this mess. We're going to clean it up, though.
Roger Marshall, who would have thought one of the most important conversations in the country last week was being had in the Hutchinson, Kansas Walmart parking lot mid-snowstorm. So there you go. Senator, thank you as always for your time. We really appreciate it, and we'll look forward to that meeting I guess you'll be a part of coming up here later this week.
Okay, thanks so much, Pete.
All right, there you go. Good stuff as always with Roger Marshall on KCMO. Our 6 at 6, top 6 stories in the 6 o'clock hour. We'll wrap up the hour with that next.